Good to have you with us on this Tuesday edition of the Ed Schultz Internet broadcast. A little late because of the breaking news and the news that has unfolded all day long. That, of course, has everything to do with the former Secretary of State and possibly the next President of the United States, Hillary Clinton. She stepped to the microphone today at the United Nations and I thought in a very simple fashion explained her position as far as what happened with all the emails and the way she handled her communication in emails. Says she followed the laws, fully complied with everything. It was allowed. So what is she doing? She is setting up the fact that Republicans go find something wrong. She says the record keeping is in order. There was no classified material. And the security question, I think, was a big one. And from the standpoint that I guess she has to apologize for being married to Bill Clinton in their home in Chappaqua, New York. Obviously, the former president has his own server, and that's what she was on. You might want to call it poor judgment. I think Hillary answered all the questions today. And I think Americans, even if you are at the visibility level and the responsible level of the Clintons, you deserve to have some privacy when it comes to personal emails. Other people may see it differently. Here's Hillary at the press conference earlier today explaining why she did what she did.
I opted for convenience to use my personal email account, which was allowed by the State Department, because I thought it would be easier to carry just one device for my work and for my personal emails instead of two. Looking back, it would have been better if I'd simply used a second email account and carried a second phone, but at the time, this didn't seem like an issue. Second, the vast majority of my work emails went to government employees at their government addresses, which meant they were captured and preserved immediately on the system at the State Department.
Is that going to be good enough? No, it's never going to be good enough. Trey Gowdy released a statement saying that this leaves more questions than answers. Well, as a red-blooded taxpaying American, the one thing I was concerned about, classified information. I mean, they can't be risque with information floating around in an unsecure area. Cut 6 on the big list, she answered to that.
I did not email any classified material to anyone on my email. There is no classified material. So I'm certainly well aware of the classification requirements and did not send classified material.
Here's what I loved about her press conference. She starts out going after the 47 Republican senators regarding the Iran nuclear talks. Listen to this.
The recent letter from Republican senators was out of step with the best traditions of American leadership. And one has to ask, what was the purpose of this letter? There appear to be two logical answers. Either these senators were trying to be helpful to the Iranians or harmful to the commander-in-chief in the midst of high-stakes international diplomacy.
I think both at this point. Let's bring in Ruth Conniff, editor of the Progressive Magazine, who's not the greatest Clinton defender in the world, but I think an honest broker in it all. Great to have you with us, Ruth.
Nice to be here, Ed.
What's your reaction to what unfolded today?
You know, I mean, I don't think that this is going to go on forever. I don't think that it was a satisfactory answer. I don't think you need two phones to have two email accounts. Most Americans know that. On the other hand, you know, it wasn't a breach of the rules at the time. And we know that. We know that Colin Powell used a private email account. So that makes it less of a story. If she'd been the only person to do this, that would have been more of a story. If she'd done it after the rule was passed saying it was not allowed, that would have been more of a story. But, you know, the problem is not so much necessarily any actual wrongdoing, but it's the appearance of a lack of transparency, which I think has dogged Hillary throughout her career. And the feeling of her desire to control, to keep for herself as an individual, to keep control over this information, even when she's serving a public function. And I think that's a legitimate concern.
Here she is talking about former President Bill Clinton's server.
Well, the system we used was set up for President Clinton's office, and it had numerous safeguards. It was on property guarded by the Secret Service, and there were no security breaches. So I think that the use of that server, which started with my husband, certainly proved to be effective and secure.
Do you think Democrats will accept that? The Dianne Feinsteins, the Dick Durbins of the world, that goes far enough to give the Democrats room to defend Hillary in all of this? What do you think, Ruth?
Well, I think if security is the issue, sure, but security is not really the issue. I believe that the Clintons know how to lock down information pretty tightly. The issue is in the public role, is there an open record? Is there open access by the public to what's happening, on taxpayer financed time with a government that's, of, by, and for the people? And that just seems to be left to the side here. So, I think that the Republicans will talk about Benghazi, and they'll do things like send this outrageous letter to Iran. And so then you want to take a partisan side and say, what a bunch of jerks they are. They're hounding this woman because they're going to hound her on anything they can find. And that's true. At the same time, I think open government is a real value, and I think the bar should be higher, even though it wasn't required by law at the time that she served.
I have to say, I thought it was very Clinton-esque that she comes out, obviously talked about her activities at the UN today, which has got a long history, advocating for women. Then she turns and basically says in her mind, and didn't verbalize this, but you could see her thinking this, okay, boys, you want to play politics? Let's take the biggest story of the day. Let's talk about the 47 Republican senators writing a letter to Iran. I mean, that to me, that was so political and so Clinton-esque. And as a lefty, I like that because I know that they're always going to be a target. There's never going to be enough trust in the room or enough good feeling in the air when it comes to the Clintons. And they simply do not want her to be president of the United States. They're going to try to damage her any way they possibly can. But she showed some spunk in that regard. Your take?
Yeah, I mean, she's been fighting what she used to call the vast right-wing conspiracy before we could all tell that it really was a vast right-wing conspiracy for a long, long time. And, it is an immediate connection between that incredible act of the Republicans to try to disrupt American diplomacy. The levels to which they've sunk in recent years are pretty astounding. And so, you hear that. Think, this is an unreasonable group of people who are going to make unreasonable demands. Yeah. They're going to beat this Benghazi horse to death again. And that's all true. It's just not, it just doesn't go to the higher standard of open government that, I still think matters.
Well, she left herself wide open today. Follow the rules, fully complied, on the record keeping, says everything's okay, no classified material. She's, in a sense, challenging the Republicans to go find something. And if you want to view it as poor judgment, and when she was asked about if this is going to affect her running for president, she said she'd let the American people decide, which tells me that obviously she's running. The trust level is always going to be with the Clintons. But I have to say, Ruth, my gut reaction is that there's nothing there. That I thought she stood a pretty good test today, and she's on the record. And if there's enough there today for the Republicans to go try to disprove. And it'll be interesting to see if they can do it. And one final comment I want to get from you. It's interesting that nobody else thinking about running, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Martin O'Malley, Jim Webb, former senator from Virginia, none of them have commented on this. What would, I mean, I've gotten more out of you, Ruth, than I have them.
Yeah, they don't want to. I mean, I think Bernie's comment was, I don't want to talk about Hillary. It's discouraging stuff. You don't want to feed this right-wing talk machine that's going to make more out of this than is really there. And at the same time, you don't want to defend somebody who is, sort of above standard, good government practice. And, I separate the Bernie Sanders and the Elizabeth Warrens of the world from the Hillary Clintons of the world on that basis, whether they're good government people. Russ Feingold, people who really clean government is their cause. And that's just so important now as money overtakes our democracy. So,
No.
they don't want to defend Hillary and they don't want to join the Fox News gang. And so they're taking a pass.
Good to have you with us, Ruth, always.
Great to talk to you, Ed.
You bet. Editor of the Progressive Magazine here on the Ed Schultz Internet broadcast, brought to you by Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team. CWA, they got a fabulous website. If you're a good lefty, check it out. They bring you up to date on all the workers' fights that are taking place out across the country and the activities they're doing. They're working to bring progressive allies together to restore our democracy and protect our bargaining rights. That's cwa-union.org. Now this.
Subscribe to the Ed Schultz podcast today. Simply log on to iTunes, search for Ed Schultz, and click the subscribe button to have the show delivered to your preferred listening device daily, free of charge. Rate and review the podcast to tell us how we're doing. More details at wegoted.com.
Ring of Fire Radio sponsors this podcast. You get it 24/7. Thank you for joining us. You can follow me on Twitter at Ed Show. Unions. President Obama and Joe Biden today, Tuesday, made comments on unions in America and talked about the significance of unions and how they're under attack. At the International Firefighters Convention, Vice President Joe Biden said that they're under attack. They're the last line of defense. And you know what? I've wanted to say this for a long time. This president and this vice president, in many regards, have been an absolute no-show when it comes to unions. And there's a record here, whether you like it or not. This is not Obama-Biden bashing. This is a fact. It's a fact. They never got a sniff on the Employee Free Choice Act, and that's what the unions wanted. And had it not been for the unions, Obama and Biden would have never defeated Hillary in the primary, would have never defeated John McCain, would have never been reelected. And it was union support, union social networking, boots on the ground, and those votes that made a huge difference in states that they won. You can't get around it. Never got Employee Free Choice Act. Never got in the arena of conversation. The Wisconsin recall, the president, I invite you to go read his comment about right to work. Really, Mr. President? Where were you when Scott Walker was going after these workers in 2011? Back in those days, Obama's advisors told us that he's not going to get involved and go to Wisconsin because that, of course, is a state issue. Really? He never really went on the road and advocated against right-to-work legislation, which is now hitting in 26 states, and it's a fever pitch with all these right-wing legislators. And now the president is on the verge of signing the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which every union in this country is against, and signed a petition on board telling the president not to do it, all the way to the point where the unions have said we're not giving a damn dime to anybody until this fast track and this TPP is resolved. Now, if you're not in the minutia of the news and if you're not in the minutia of trade agreements, you don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But if you're a good lefty and you pay attention to the left media in this country, which I am a member of, this is a tell it like it is moment. Obama's been a no-show for unions. And Biden's been a good lip service and a good second guy to follow the president, and he knows better. He knows better. The Democrats need to find a real warrior for unions that will fight back against right to work, that will fight back against lousy trade agreements, that will actually push forward on the Employee Free Choice Act and workers' rights. And this is something that Obama hasn't done. Now, Obama has done health care and he's done the automobile industry, and the unions had to take a financial haircut there. This president's done an awful lot of good. But to the very people that put him in office, in many respects, he's turned his back on. If you don't agree with me, drop me a line. Follow me on Twitter at Ed Show and tell me how wrong I am. But you got to give me some facts. I've given you facts. This is the Ed Schultz Internet Broadcast, brought to you by Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSafe team, and Ring of Fire Radio. We're back tomorrow.